Imagine waking up one morning, thinking it's just another day, until your wife casually tells you over breakfast that she's leaving for another man. And not just any man. A criminal, a con artist who's been using her to launder millions. As she walks out the door, you think that's the worst part. But then you check your bank account and realize she's taken everything. What would you do? Let it go? Or fight back? This is the story of how I lost everything, and how I took it all back. The morning started like any other. Nathan Porter stood at the kitchen counter, absent-mindedly spreading almond butter over a slice of rye toast. His thoughts were elsewhere, mentally reviewing the key points of his upcoming presentation for the Pacific Oceanic Research Summit. The topic? The rising threat of microplastic pollution in coastal ecosystems. It was a subject he was passionate about, one that had consumed his time for months. The soft hum of the refrigerator blended into the background as he absent-mindedly reached for the jar of blueberry preserves. Halfway through, he realized he had forgotten to take his laptop off sleep mode. His slides were still unfinished, and the conference was only a few days away. There was still time, he reassured himself. Probably. A set of rapid, confident footsteps echoed from the staircase. Lena entered the kitchen, the sharp clack of her heels breaking the usual quiet of their morning routine. She looked different today. There was something calculated in her posture, an almost deliberate precision in the way she moved. Her shoulder-length auburn hair was immaculately styled, her makeup flawless. The crisp white blouse she wore was neatly tucked into a high-waisted skirt that hugged her curves. A bit too formal for a typical day at the Kingston Realty office. Nathan glanced up from his toast. Morning, he said, more out of habit than anything. Lena flashed him a smile. Too bright, too forced. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? Nathan hesitated. He knew her too well. She hated mornings, especially before coffee. She never called any morning beautiful unless she had a reason to fake enthusiasm. Something was off. Before he could ask, she spoke again. Her tone casual but her eyes watching him closely. By the way, she said, adjusting a gold bracelet on her wrist. Ryan's outside. I figured it's time you two finally meet. Nathan's hand froze, the toast hovering inches from his mouth. His mind stumbled, struggling to process the words. Ryan? He repeated, certain he had misheard. Lena sighed, rolling her eyes as if he was being deliberately slow. My boyfriend, Nathan. Ryan. He's in the car. A strange ringing filled Nathan's ears. He turned his head slowly toward the window. Sure enough, a sleek black Audi sat parked in their driveway, its glossy surface catching the early morning light. A man sat in the driver's seat, sunglasses shielding his face. Nathan's stomach twisted. What the hell is going on? His voice came out low, controlled, though every muscle in his body tensed. Lena exhaled in frustration, as if she were explaining something painfully obvious. We've been seeing each other for a while now. I think it's time we stop pretending. 15 years. 15 years of marriage. Of laughter. Of shared struggles. And this was how it ended? A casual announcement over breakfast? Nathan placed his toast down, his appetite gone. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, but he kept his expression neutral. You can't be serious. Lena's smile turned tight, her cheerfulness suddenly strained. Nathan, let's not make this dramatic. If you're going to act this way, I'll just leave with him right now. Your choice. Her words landed like a punch to the gut. Was this really happening? Was this the woman he had built a life with? For the first time in what felt like forever, anger pushed past the initial wave of disbelief. Beneath the shock, something inside him started burning. Nathan took a slow breath, his hands pressing against the edge of the counter to ground himself. Then, in a voice steady but firm, he spoke. If you walk out that door, we're done. Something flickered across Lena's face. Uncertainty, hesitation. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by steely determination. She reached for her purse, movements brisk, purposeful. I guess that's that, she said. No regret, no second thoughts. Nathan didn't move, didn't stop her. The door swung open. Bright morning sunlight flooded the hallway as she stepped outside, heels clicking against the pavement. She didn't look back. Then the door shut behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan stood frozen, staring at the spot where she had just been. His hands rested on the counter, gripping the cool surface as if it was the only thing anchoring him to reality. For the first time in years, the house felt empty. His knees felt weak. Slowly, he stumbled toward a chair and sank into it, staring blankly ahead. The rhythm of his own breath felt foreign. The clock on the wall ticked, indifferent to the destruction of his life. The day moved forward without him. Nathan wasn't sure how much time had passed since Lena walked out, but the house felt different now. Emptier, colder. The untouched toast still sat on the plate, but the hunger that had once gnawed at his stomach had disappeared completely. He sat motionless, staring at nothing in particular, until the shrill ring of his phone snapped him out of his daze. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Porter?" The voice on the other end was professional, almost detached. "This is Samantha Rhodes from Riverway Credit Union's Fraud Department. We've noticed some unusual activity on your joint account with Lena Porter and wanted to confirm if these transactions were authorized." Nathan's pulse quickened. What kind of activity? Samantha hesitated. Several large withdrawals over the past week, along with a series of international charges. Flights, luxury shopping, cash transfers. Your account has been nearly emptied. The words barely registered. He gripped the phone tighter. "That's impossible." "I'm afraid it's not," she continued. "Would you like to file a dispute? I'd recommend freezing the remaining balance immediately." Nathan swallowed hard, his free hand clenching into a fist. Lena hadn't just walked out. She had robbed him blind. His voice was tight, controlled. "Yes, freeze everything." By the time he ended the call, his hands were shaking. He needed to see it with his own eyes. Pulling out his laptop, he logged into their bank account. The numbers stared back at him. Almost everything was gone. The savings they had built over the years. The emergency fund. Even the investment account they had set aside for the future. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate breaths. The betrayal cut deeper than he thought possible. She hadn't even tried to hide it. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Maya Patel, his colleague at the West Coast Marine Institute and one of the few people he actually considered a friend. She stepped inside, concern etched across her face. "Nathan," she said softly, "you look like hell." He managed a weak smirk. "Feel like it too." She hesitated before taking a seat across from him. I don't know if this is the right time, but I need to tell you something." Nathan exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. "Go on." Maya shifted uncomfortably. "I saw Lena a few times, with another man. I didn't know if I should say anything, but they seemed close. Too close." The words stung, but they weren't surprising. He had suspected it long before this morning. He just hadn't wanted to believe it. Nathan nodded slowly. "How long?" Maya sighed. "Months, at least." A bitter laugh escaped his lips. "Of course." Maya leaned forward, her voice lower now. "Nathan, there's more." He looked up at her, wary. "More?" She hesitated, then pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was a news article, something about Kingston Realty and an internal investigation into fraudulent property sales. Nathan frowned. "What does this have to do with me?" Maya bit her lip. "Scroll down." He did, and then he saw it. Lena's name. His mind raced as he skimmed the text. Questionable real estate transactions. Fake shell companies. Properties sold below market value to undisclosed buyers. Nathan sat back, his breath coming in short, sharp exhales. Had she been running a scam right under his nose? Maya's voice was gentle but firm. "Nathan, I think you need to start looking at the bigger picture." He exhaled sharply. First the affair, then the money. Now this? What the hell had he been married to? His stomach twisted as realization set in. Lena hadn't just left him for another man. She had been planning this for a long time, and she had made sure he was left with nothing. But something inside him had shifted. The shock was fading, replaced by something else. Determination. Maya was right. This was bigger than just a broken marriage. If Lena thought she could walk away unscathed, she was wrong. Nathan sat at his desk, staring at the screen, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. The bank records, the fraudulent real estate transactions, Lena's name appearing in one too many shady deals. It was all there, scattered like puzzle pieces. He had spent the last several hours digging, combing through old financial statements, credit card charges, and property records. The deeper he went, the clearer the picture became. Lena hadn't just stolen from him. She had been part of something much bigger. His phone buzzed. A message from Zoe, his sister. "Call me."
Urgent.
Nathan immediately dialed, and Zoe picked up on the first ring. "Tell me you're sitting down," she said. He clenched his jaw. "Just say it." "I pulled some legal records from my firm's database. That real estate fraud case. Lena's more than just involved. She's one of the key players. And guess who else is tied to it?" Nathan didn't need to guess. "Ryan." "Bingo." Zoe exhaled. "Nathan, this guy isn't just some side fling. Ryan is a corporate fixer. He moves money, buries illegal transactions, and makes sure no one gets caught. He's done this before." Nathan closed his eyes, gripping the phone. "So she didn't just cheat. She partnered up with a crook. That's what it looks like." Zoe hesitated before adding, "Nathan, they've laundered a lot of money. If Lena's name is all over these deals, she's looking at serious charges." Nathan felt something shift inside him. He had spent the past 2 days reeling from the betrayal, the financial ruin, the humiliation. Now it was time to fight back. Maya had warned him about getting too personal with this, about turning it into a vendetta. But this wasn't just about him anymore. Lena and Ryan were playing a dangerous game, and it was time to push back. That night, Nathan showed up at a public town hall meeting, one that Ryan would be attending. It wasn't just any meeting. Ryan's company was pushing for a new high-end coastal development, a resort that would destroy the local marine ecosystem. The project had been facing resistance, but tonight, Ryan was there to reassure the public. Nathan slipped into the back of the room as Ryan took the stage, his voice smooth and confident. He spoke about jobs, tourism, growth, all the usual selling points. But Nathan knew better. When the floor opened for questions, he stood up. "Nathan Porter, marine biologist." He introduced himself, his voice calm, measured. "I have a few concerns about this project." Ryan smiled, too polished. "Of course. We welcome any concerns from the community." Nathan pulled out a folder of documents. "I've compiled research on the environmental destruction this project will cause. But that's not my only concern." He paused, then continued, letting the words sink in. "I also found something interesting in the financial records. A series of real estate transactions all tied to shell companies. A pattern of fraud that, coincidentally, also involves you, Mr. Ryan Garrett." The entire room went silent. Ryan's smile faltered, just slightly. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Porter." Nathan didn't blink. "I'm not implying anything.
I'm stating facts."
Would you like me to list them?" A murmur spread through the crowd. The city officials who had been nodding along moments ago now exchanged uneasy glances. The news cameras in the back of the room suddenly had a new story to follow. Nathan saw Ryan's jaw clench. He wasn't expecting this. Lena, sitting near the front, had gone completely pale. She hadn't seen this coming. The moment the meeting ended, Nathan slipped out, heart pounding with adrenaline. As he reached his car, a voice stopped him. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Nathan turned to find Ryan standing there, barely controlling his anger. Nathan shoved his hands into his pockets, keeping his face neutral. "Just informing the public." Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't know who you're messing with." Nathan smirked. "Neither do you." Ryan exhaled sharply. "Walk away, Porter. This isn't your fight." Nathan's expression didn't change. "It is now." Ryan stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked off, jaw tight. Nathan watched him go. The war had officially begun. Nathan barely slept that night. The adrenaline from the town hall confrontation was still coursing through his veins. But underneath it was something more. A sense of clarity he hadn't felt in weeks. Lena and Ryan weren't just selfish, they were criminals. And he wasn't going to let them walk away from this unscathed. By morning, his inbox was flooded with emails, journalists, environmental groups, legal analysts. His public call-out had made an impact. People wanted answers. A message from Zoe stood out among the flood. "We need to meet. I have something big." Nathan arrived at her office an hour later. Zoe had papers spread across her desk, her expression grim but satisfied. "I got my hands on Ryan's offshore accounts," she said, sliding a thick file toward him. "Or, more specifically, the ones he didn't cover well enough." Nathan flipped through the documents. Hidden transactions. Property sales routed through fake companies. Wire transfers to unregistered businesses. It was all there, proof of financial crimes. Zoe leaned back in her chair. "This is enough to get the feds involved." Nathan exhaled. "Do it." Zoe gave him a long look. "There's something else," she said carefully. "I found Lena's name in these transactions. Not just as someone who benefited. She actively signed off on them." Nathan stared at the documents, his stomach twisting. He had wanted to believe that, at some point, she had just gotten caught up in Ryan's mess. But this? She had been part of it from the beginning. She knew exactly what she was doing, Zoe said softly. Nathan shut the file and nodded. Then she goes down with him. That evening, he sat at his kitchen table, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. His phone vibrated. Lena. He let it ring. A few minutes later, another text came in. "Nathan, please. I need to talk." He stared at the screen, considering his next move. Then, slowly, he typed back, "Meet me at Emerson Cafe. 1 hour." When he arrived, Lena was already there, sitting in a corner booth. She looked different, less polished, more nervous. The confident woman who had walked out of their home just days ago was gone. She exhaled in relief when she saw him. "Thank you for coming." Nathan didn't respond. He slid into the seat across from her, his face unreadable. Lena swallowed hard. "Nathan, I made a mistake." He let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "Which one?" She looked down at her hands. "Ryan, he lied to me. He told me this was all above board. I didn't know." "Don't," Nathan interrupted. "Don't sit here and lie to my face." Lena flinched but recovered quickly. I need your help. Ryan's distancing himself from me, and I don't know what's going to happen." Nathan studied her. For years, he had loved this woman. He had trusted her. And now, she was scrambling. Not because she regretted what she had done, but because she had finally realized she wasn't untouchable. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small USB drive, placing it on the table between them. "That's a recording of this conversation," he said evenly. Lena's eyes widened. "You recorded?" Nathan leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I'm done playing the fool, Lena. You want help? Here's your only option. You confess. You turn on Ryan. You sign the divorce papers and give up any claim to my assets. If you don't, this recording goes straight to the authorities." Lena's breath hitched. "You wouldn't." Nathan's expression didn't change. "Try me." She stared at him, searching for some trace of the man who would have forgiven her. But he was gone. Finally, she reached for the papers he slid across the table, her hands trembling. Nathan watched in silence as she signed. Without another word, he stood, leaving her sitting alone in the dim cafe, her world unraveling around her. By the next morning, the FBI raided Ryan's office. Agents poured through his files, confiscating hard drives and seizing documents. Within hours, he was arrested on charges of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Lena was taken into custody soon after, her involvement impossible to deny. Nathan watched it unfold on the news, standing in his living room as reporters detailed their downfall. He thought he would feel satisfied, but instead he just felt free. For the first time in weeks, the weight was gone. He wasn't a victim anymore. He had won. Nathan stood on the shoreline, the salty air filling his lungs as he watched the waves roll in. It had been 3 weeks since Ryan and Lena had been arrested. The news cycle had moved on, but the consequences of their crimes lingered. Lawsuits, frozen assets, shattered reputations. And yet, standing here, Nathan felt no satisfaction in their downfall. The man he had been a month ago, the one consumed by anger, by betrayal, had wanted to see them suffer. But as he watched the ocean stretch endlessly before him, he realized he didn't need revenge. He needed purpose. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Maya. Town hall fundraiser is packed. You coming? Nathan glanced at the time. He had almost forgotten. The town had rallied together after the public exposure of Ryan's failed resort project, turning the destruction into an opportunity. Instead of a high-rise development, the land would now be converted into a protected coastal reserve, one that Nathan had been asked to help oversee. For the first time in weeks, he smiled. When he arrived at the event, the energy in the room was electric. People were hopeful, engaged, eager to rebuild after the mess Ryan and Lena had left behind. Nathan shook hands, spoke with reporters, and listened as scientists, activists, and community members discussed ways to restore the local marine ecosystem. Maya approached him with a grin. You're the town's new hero. Nathan rolled his eyes. I didn't do this alone. No, but you started it. She nudged him playfully. And you're going to see it through, right? Nathan exhaled, looking around at the people who had come together because of what he had exposed. This was bigger than him now. Yeah, he said finally. I am. A few days later, Nathan met with Zoe in her office one last time. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. So, what's next for you? Nathan shrugged. The reserve project is going to need a lot of work. I'll focus on that. And after that? He smiled slightly. After that, I guess I'll figure it out. Zoe studied him for a moment before nodding. I think you already have. The final piece of his past came full circle when he got an unexpected call. A federal investigator. We're offering you the chance to testify officially, the agent said. Your knowledge helped expose one of the biggest real estate fraud schemes in the state. If you want to make sure they stay locked up, this is your chance. Nathan didn't hesitate. Send me the details. The old Nathan would have done this for payback. The new Nathan was doing it for justice. On a crisp morning, months later, Nathan stood at the edge of the newly established Kingston Marine Reserve, watching the sunrise. The battle was over. Ryan was serving time. Lena had taken a plea deal. The town had moved forward. And so had he. Maya joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. It's official, she said. The reserve is protected. This place is safe because of you. Nathan took a sip, the warmth spreading through him. Because of all of us. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. The past no longer controlled him. He had found something greater than revenge. He had found his purpose.